just talk you through this extract, looking at some of the key kind of quotes that you could pick out and analyse. So after we've sort of edited your own notes on this today, you will spend Friday's lesson writing. So very generously, Mr. Long has given us his lesson on Friday because school finishes after period 3. He's done enough with you for the summer. I would like you to write this essay either before Friday, or if not, then on in that Friday lesson, period 3. Okay, so hopefully you've watched the little clip that didn't sort of start straight away, did it? But it started around here and just kind of gave us Othello there, and we saw some of the emotion coming through. Let's look through it then. Soft you, a word or two before you go. I have done the state some service, and they know it. No more of that. I pray you in your letters, when you shall seek these unlucky deeds relate, speak of me as I am, nothing extenuate, nor set down aught in malice. Okay, let's just look at, so the first quote I'm kind of picking out is this: I've done the state some service and they know it. There's a hint of arrogance and pride here. Is it misplaced? It also, quite probably, but it also sort of reminds us of that earlier Othello in Act 1 when he says, my services shall outtongue his complaints. That kind of that confidence that he had in the legal system very early on there. So he's kind of now just sort of asking for the floor one more time. He's like, I've, kind of given my life to the state, really. So now you must kind of, listen to me one last time, kind of hear me out, listen to this. Okay, so part of the tragedy is that he loses that confidence, he loses that self-assured streak that he has, and he questions Desdemona's faithfulness. If only he'd stayed kind of steadfast to, to himself, to what he knew, his own kind of views, and trusted more in himself there. So speak of me as I am. So this displays Othello's concern with his reputation. Just like Cassio, that's kind of paramount importance to him, and he's obviously, moments before he kills himself, he's sort of thinking of his legacy and how he might be remembered, and that sort of links to the pride that led him to condemn Desdemona for the kind of cuckold me, for that kind of humiliation and that belief in her crime. So nothing extenuates, nothing, don't kind of make anything up, nothing extra, nothing changed, nor set down aught in malice. Then you speak of one that loved not wisely, but too well. So here we've got his kind of, this recognition that his love for Desdemona was too strong to handle. It is, and we remember he says, it is too much joy when I love thee not. Chaos is come again. So we had that kind of earlier, little foreboding in these kind of comments. There was the recognition when he was falling in love that this was an all-consuming passion that overcame his reason. As we know, once the seed of doubt was planted, it was sort of, tragic, since we saw Othello use reason against Brabantio, the Senate, Cassio, etc. Hang on, what else did I want to say about this line? I think the audience might likely agree with this. However, he also tries to assure the characters that he is not one easily jealous, but being wrought and perplexed in the extreme. Well, this is kind of quite ironic comment. He's been the victim of the green-eyed monster. That has fed on itself. So although he was not jealous of Rodrigo and Desdemona, wouldn't believe he was jealous. He had initially rejected Iago's warning, but perhaps his insecurities fed the seed of doubt. So I kind of put here in my notes, I'm questioning, would the audience entirely agree with this? Would they believe this? Whilst we know that Othello was provoked to jealousy by Iago, perhaps it's also the case that he also had a proclivity for jealousy, and that Iago merely exploited this rather than sort of caused it. Okay, so it might sound, so looking here then, but being raw, perplexed in the extremes, so kind of confused, manipulated by Iago. It might sound like an excuse, but it should remind us as well of the almost supernatural power that Iago has, and the viewpoint that Othello and Desdemona were helpless in the face of his evil Machiavellian ways. And you can use, some of the poison quotes, etc. Here. Okay, like the base Indian threw a pearl away, richer than all of his tribe. So this simile shows him recognising what he's done. It expresses Othello's acknowledgement that he has destroyed something far more precious, beautiful, and pure than he himself could ever hope to be. It alludes to the possessive nature of the relationship and has strong racial and cultural undertones. Black versus white, cultured versus base. The conflict between these has arguably driven the tragedy. He goes on, of one whose subdued eyes, albeit unused to the melting mood, drop tears as fast as the Arabian trees their medicinal gum. Set you down this, and say besides that in Aleppo once, where a malignant and a turbaned Turk beat a Venetian and introduced the state, I took by the throat the circumcised dog and smote him thus. So here we've got kind of more imagery which reveals this sort of deep racial insecurity and prejudice. The Turks were an anathema to Venetian culture and civilization. Are we turned Turk? You'll remember kind of earlier on comments making, are we so uncivil that we would behave like this? And so it seems though Othello could be admitting that he is conformed to racial stereotypes. And, we've talked about that before, that, throughout the play, Othello is othered by people, he's recognised within the army, but it's always there, even just the way that he is referred to, as the Moor. And I suppose a life of that has its impact, doesn't it? And he is he's kind of vulnerable here. A word then on killing himself. So, and smote him thus, and he stabs himself and he sort of dies there. So we've got a couple of things to think about here. One, we know that suicide is a sin in Christianity. We know, that at the time we're looking at a kind of Christian society. So there's that. How might the audience kind of view suicide? But then, sort of before that, the ancient Greeks and Romans, and again, that's a kind of history of tragedy, isn't it? That's where tragedy, the genre, has come from. They sort of saw suicide as patriotic, often a noble act. It was a way of avoiding disgrace and preserving one's honour. And so we see in many Roman and Greek tragedies, we see the protagonist sort of committing suicide, and for other reasons as well. Sometimes, to avoid further suffering, to end grief, or sacrifice themselves for the greater good. So just sort of a question, I suppose, to you now. Do you feel any of these motives apply to Othello's suicide at the end of the play? So, he's broken. He realizes now that he's kind of killed the innocent Desdemona, but why kill himself? What do you think the sort of reason there is? Just one for you to think about, really. Okay, Lodovico, oh bloody period, Gratiano. All that spoke is marred. Sort of, ruined, damaged, gone. I kissed thee ere I killed thee, no way but this, killing myself to die upon a kiss. He falls onto the bed and dies. For this did I fear, but thought he had no weapon, for he was great of heart. Cassio's comment reminds us of the high status from which Othello has fallen. Quote all positive descriptions from the start. You can kind of link them across here, and that sort of will show the examiner that you've got that breadth, that you've got that understanding. We can never, when writing, you've got your extract. Yes, you must write about the extract, but you also need to show understanding of the tragic arc, the kind of the fall of Othello. Implicit in that is showing, having the understanding. This is what he was, this is where he now is, okay, and that's a kind of nice little link into that for you, which will give you sort of a bit of your AO4 there. It would also link to Othello's own admission that he loved too well, sort of, we saw that earlier on, didn't we? Okay. To Iago, O Spartan dog, more fell than anguish, hunger or the sea. So is this another reminder for us that Iago has been an important force in the tragedy? The sight of the dead, poisoned sight reminds us of Iago's determination to destroy with his poison and pestilence. Okay, look on the tragic loading of this bed, a reminder of the consequences of mixing public and private lives, wedding night in Cyprus, final scenes in the bedroom, etc. This is thy work, the object poisoned sight, let it be hid. Myself will straight abroad, and to the state this heavy act with heavy heart relate. Okay, so things to sort of think about. Othello's return to eloquence. This is quite a kind of nice little speech that he makes here. He asks for the floor, he's given it, he makes his justification. What do you think? Is he a flawed character? Is he, is this a sort of ironic speech? Is he redeemed? Is this a redemptive speech? Whatever you do, please make sure that in the writing of this question you stay focused on the extract, okay? Don't, yes, you're going to use these points to, connect, to show that overall understanding of the character and the tragedy as a whole, but don't get too sidetracked, okay? Just always kind of keep your eye on the questions. Ask yourself, what can you see in this extract that could help to explain the tragedy that has unfolded in terms of characteristics, setting, or social and racial prejudice? Okay, so we'll leave the video there. Make sure that you've added to your own notes in preparation for writing this essay on Friday.